May I have your attention for a very important public service announcement? We are taking over the internet, and the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for another edition of the Pocket Locker podcast. And gang, who cares who's the president? Doesn't matter when they're not the United States champion. I mean, look at that belt. That belt does not get enough credit. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. And gang, I'm so glad y'all are here. So glad y'all decided to join me. Let's go ahead and get into it. This man, Joe Biden, is trying to rehabilitate his reputation. He is trying to win the confidence of his party once again. He is trying to show America is the man for the job when it comes to defeating one Donald J. Trump, who is trying to, I don't know, like boil the world in like a pot of his own vial. Like, I don't even understand. Like just y'all just make up some evil shit. It's probably in Trump's plan. Just think of some like vile, reprehensible, cartoon criminal type shit, and it's probably what Donald Trump is trying to do. But the question is, can Joe Biden stop him from doing it? Let's figure it out. I had to get ready for my Skeptic Haven appearance. I didn't get to hear all the press conference. So you're going to be the judge. I'm putting this on you. I blame y'all. It's up to you to decide whether or not we are going to keep this man.
Thank you. Please be seated.
What's going on, Biden?
Well, good evening.
Let's fix that.
We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success. So especially momentous because it
What up, Robin? Did you watch this damn press conference?
The most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the
What up? Wait, am I supposed to say this new thing? How do I even say this? Hanonym? I'm fucking this all the way up. It is a weird state that we're in, but that's where we're at.
Invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance.
Hanunim, I could do that.
Makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my
You see still good.
predecessor
All right,
has
bro.
made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did.
I don't know yet, Robin. I haven't looked.
Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than the political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual.
So my subs are at 956. Maybe some of y'all know. I don't really remember what they were right before the show.
It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come.
Oh, thank you so much, Robin.
Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know. The answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We are an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month.
That's good, Robin.
Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years.
Actually, I think when a suggestion for a sub comes from like the chat or a viewer, I think it's even better than the streamer, because every streamer wants you to sub to their channel, of course. But when you hear people in the chat say, you think at least people that, you know, at least enjoy the same type of stuff that you might enjoy, think it's worth doing. So I always really appreciate that. To be honest with y'all, so far, I heard this before. I wanted to make sure I gave this a good listen. I think he sounds good to me. He has had some issues with pronunciation, like when he says certain things. And I'm aware that people key in on all of those little missteps, but you know, I actually think he sounds good.
Falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico.
No, it's not live. It just ended. It just ended like a little bit ago. It was tonight. It started a little before I went on Skeptic Haven, so I'm just trying to get caught up with it. And I want us all to like look at this together. That's why I really did this, and that's why I'm not necessarily like jumping into every little thing. Like I honestly just want us to like just chill, you know. I order some food, you know, we just listening. I do really want to know what y'all think about all of this.
Border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today
I feel you, man,
than when Trump left office.
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive, and I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
All right, so the prepared portion I thought actually, you know, was cool. Like I do hear things in his pronunciation that are, you know, people just have to decide how much that matters to them. But it is that sort of age-related like loss. To me, it just, and again, I'm not trying to assess his mental state. I don't know, but to me, it's what happens is it sounds like those things that are like the agility of tongue, if that makes any sense, right? Like certain things that we pronounce that are actually quite difficult to say, and you know, it's like little nimbleness of tongue things. And we all know Joe Biden has always had speech things. That's why, you know, I feel like I've been really slow to raise concerns about it, like, because we've always known this about Joe Biden, and I don't want to be ageist and I don't want to be ableist. You know, we're just trying to ride the narrative and see what's going on. I do think it's, you know, the narrative has just been wild, obviously, the last couple of weeks since the debate. It's very clear this is an effort to see if he's trying to regain people's confidence. And I want to know what y'all think. Like, are you feeling more confident based on what you're hearing? But like I said, I think he did well with the prepared portion. People are here. If you've been listening to what people are saying, people are really here for this more open part. It's a press conference, like where he's going to be answering questions. I'm imagining the sort of selection of who he's going to take questions from. It's just a practical matter. Like it's probably hella people there, and I'm sure like that's just a flow thing. But I'm sure that's something people will talk about. But yeah, I say all that to say I think he sounded good with his prepared remarks, and I think this is the meat and potato here where he's going to be taking questions. So yeah, thank y'all for joining me for this. I appreciate it.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you.
I feel you,
Um,
Han.
My question for you is, how are you
Just gonna take me a
incorporating
minute.
these
I
developments
gotta come up with
into your
something.
decision to stay?
Hanonim.
And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president because I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one. The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish. There's so much, we've made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million. So things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down. And so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up President Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plan so far and what's going to happen, in the future, if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up.
Mm.
That
Hey,
way
Lena.
we grow the economy. And
Hey,
the wealthy still
Nitty.
do very well. They do fine.
Nitty, let you
Guess
know
what?
what it is. Corpse
I mean,
2024.
mainstream economists have said we haven't done well. What have we not done?
They say vote blue no matter who. Nitty said vote blue no matter what. As long as it's a noun on the ballot, it's a person, place, or thing. They could write Cancun at the top of the Democratic ticket. I'm voting for Cancun for president.
And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. Doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time.
Hey,
for example,
Dave.
if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase in corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better. And we talk about how, for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world, and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing, just coming in the bean. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. But it's happening. It's happening. And it's going to grow economies. All through, and by the way, red states and blue states. Manufacturers as much in red states as blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. Like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you look at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Some of them with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about. That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. Very end. I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
Well, AR, that's the thing, right? So, we'll talk, but there's people are going to pin him into an uncomfortable corner on the Kamala stuff, because part of that was the talk of people basically saying he's been undermining her by being so strong about he's the best, he's the only qualified person, he's the only one that could beat Trump, that the people who are wanting to push Kamala, that he was sort of undermining that. I think that's why he had to be clear and unambiguous that she is qualified, and that he believes that she would be a great president. And by the way, I do think she's qualified. But nobody's gonna let him have an easy out on that. So there's nothing he could say about that would appease people, because he either throws her under the bus and continues to say he's the only guy, or he says she can do it, and then people are like, well, then get out of the fucking way and let her do it. I don't envy him on that particular issue.
I'm sorry, Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to...
Why are we questioning why Biden should run instead of why Trump should run? Because that's just the world we live in. Like, I'll be honest with y'all. Like, I don't have a negative opinion of the people that are questioning Biden. I understand that a lot of people think it's too late, or they find it frustrating, or they think that we're poking at him and that we're sinking the ship. I don't necessarily see it that way. I get that concern, certainly, but I think the concerns about Biden are real. This is part of my bigger analysis of this. I don't want to be too long-winded, but I do think Biden is dealing with the well poisoning of our entire electorate in all of the conversations that we have. I certainly don't think the critique that he's been getting is fair or balanced, or but that is the time we live in. There was a quote, somebody captured it really well the other day, and I'm forgetting it. but it was basically just acknowledging that we're not dealing in a fair situation. We're dealing in bizarro upside down world where literally nothing Trump can do knocks him off. The reality is Trump shouldn't be in this conversation. First off, there's no way. I don't give a fuck how popular he is, what his poll numbers are, how much money he raised, if he's the former president or not. Given every single thing that that man has done, there's no way on earth that the Republicans should even be putting him forward. The truth is, if we were going to be really, really all the way real about this, we should be utterly shaming every single Republican and conservative we know, because there's no way that they should even accept having Donald Trump as the nominee. Now, the reality is, again, we can't do anything about that. So Trump's their nominee, Trump's their guy. They don't care if he's a criminal. They don't care if he's a rapist. They don't care if he's a traitor. They don't care if he's going to be a dictator. They don't care about Project 2025. They literally don't care. Matter of fact, I hazard to say I'm wrong. They do care. They do care. They want all of those things. Those things have become very important to them, and they want to make sure Trump gets in power. So when I say they don't care what deal they have to make with the devil. They're determined to deal with the devil. And so we do find ourselves in this world. And again, you have to remember too that this election is considered marginal, and it shouldn't be. Again, not only should Donald Trump not be on the ticket, there's no way anybody should be voting for him. So literally the polls right now should be like, Joe Biden is, for the first time in actual history, he's actually up by 100%. What do you mean Joe Biden is up by 100%? Nigga, I mean what I said. I said Joe Biden is up by 100%. I mean Joe Biden is up by 100%. We have done the polling, and literally there are no adult human beings in America that are willing to vote for Donald Trump. And so literally, no matter how we do the polls, all the votes are going to Joe Biden. But again, that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where actually America's like, I don't know. It's kind of a toss up, you know? And like half your neighbors are like all about that Biden, but half your neighbors are like all about that Trump. And yes, again, like we should focus on that. But like, I hate to say this, but like we do focus on it. Like, let's be real. Donald Trump is the most influential person in my lifetime. You love him, hate him. Donald Trump's going down in history on a short list with Pontius Pilate in history. Pontius Pilate and Hitler. Like literally one of the most epic, influential, cosmic villains of human history. He is a figure, as much as I hate the man, he is a figure of immense consequence. And we live in bizarro world where people just love him and they want to vote for him no matter what. And so it becomes about the fact that Biden is behind to Trump. It is in 2020. In 2020, Biden was crushing Trump. He's not crushing Trump right now. The truth is, especially after his performance in that debate, he's losing to Trump. He's losing to him by, like significant enough margin for people to be concerned. He's losing in the swing states. That's actually important. He's losing with independents. That's actually important. And actually, he's losing some of the, things are swinging towards Trump. So some of the states that were on the fence are now leaning Republican. Some of the places that were heavily Democratic are now only lean Democratic. So what I would love to see from people is just a deep breath, in the sense of, are some people in this conversation being bad actors? Yeah, maybe. Are there some people in this conversation who are like secretly behind the scenes, like, yeah, we want to enable Trump and we want to see MAGA come back, and so we're just going to poke holes at Biden so that we can get another Trump administration? Sure. But I don't think that that's where most of those people are coming from. I think most of those people are coming from legitimate concern about Biden's electability. And I'm not here right now to mitigate whether that's right or wrong. Y'all should know me well enough to know I think that's wrong. But this is electoral politics. And so right and wrong don't matter. Vote counts is all that matters. And so I just think the people who, the same way people come to me and I'm saying to y'all, look at these polls, look at this, look at this, look at the debate, look at this, and y'all are saying, it don't fucking matter. Biden's our guy. He's the incumbent. We got to stick with him. We got to deal with him. I'm going, oh, okay, cool. I'm just asking that y'all get other people the same benefit of the doubt. Hang on, I got to take this call real quick.
On the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We have allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making.
You know, I got to be honest with y'all, like Pitbull Punk, yeah, I agree. I mean, I honestly think most Trump supporters are beyond the pale. I also got to be honest with y'all, like, I think Trump is in a stronger position now than he was in 2020. I think he's likely in even a stronger position than he was in 2016. I'm also just putting this into the ether, y'all. As a black man in this country, I'm trying to tell anybody I can get a hold of, you have no idea the power of white grievance. You're not understanding how your fellow whiteys really feel about white supremacy. And I am telling you, it is something that will not go quietly into that night. And so I think there is a quiet bubbling of white grievance that is going to express itself on election day, and it is a serious problem, and that it is one of the things I'm most scared about. But you combine that with the out of touch conspiracy thinking, and honestly, the religiosity. I hate to say this, but like, a lot of this is the perfect storm of the political culture realities that we live in. And we have let people's religiosity get so out of hand that it has become common practice for people to just have their own reality. And we've created a society where your truth and your reality is totally fine. And now we want to draw restrictions around it, and it's just way too late. It's just, people are just, they're way too into their own delusions.
A day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go
Hey,
in. It's a
PC.
logical thing to do. Second question related to
bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? Created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. Who I got here?
I gotta just say this too. Like, I'm gonna step away just for a sec. I'm gonna keep my speakers on, so I'm listening. But I think my food's here. But y'all, I just and I mean this so sincerely, y'all. The math is off. The math doesn't math with any of this. None of this makes sense because, again, Trump shouldn't even be in this thing. But look, for what it's worth, I really do appreciate Biden drawing the contrast between him and Trump. I think he's trying to stay on message with how dangerous Trump would be. And as much as it's hard for me to get excited about Biden's policies because, you know, none of it is as aggressively progressive or socialist as I'd like it to be. But we have never heard Trump do any of this. For no matter what you say about Joe Biden, we are hearing an adult who is an adult in the room be a coherent leader describing presidential responsibilities in line with what it means to be a public official in the United States of America. Like, it's just profoundly normal versus the wildness of Donald Trump. Even with Joe Biden, even the conversation is, well, you know, does he have the vigor we like for the next 4 years? Or can we accept the level of gaffes? You know, what's the contingency plan? You know, even at its worst, those are still reasonable conversations about a reasonable human being who, no matter what you say, is just doing a reasonable fucking job. And so it is incredibly infuriating that we're even here because, again, there's really no comparison. You have never, ever, ever heard Donald Trump, not one time, give anything remotely in the same zip code as a normal political speech. And you've never, ever, ever, not one time, heard Joe Biden do anything else. So by any normal count, it should be 100% failure rate in Donald Trump's camp because he has never once sounded like a reasonable adult leader versus 100% Joe Biden, who has never not sounded like a reasonable elected official. And I'm no Joe Biden enthusiast, y'all. But how do people not see that? All right, y'all, I'll be right back.
Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine. That that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, because you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. No, that's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office. I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon?
So, Crystal, that is really a lot, and to be honest, I've heard that's where too, like, the tension comes in. It's the rigidity. You know, on one hand, Joe Biden is like, oh my goodness, Donald Trump's an existential threat to civilization. Saving democracy is the most important thing. Winning is the most important thing. And all people, I think, have wanted to hear from Joe is, if it turns out that you're not the best answer to beat Donald Trump and you're not the best answer to save democracy, that you'll be open to facilitating a path to something else. And I think people are reasonable to be concerned that he seems to be totally unopen to that possibility. That is what concerns people. But yeah, you know, I don't, you know, y'all know I'm voting for Biden if he's on the ballot, and I think most people are. I think it really is going to come down to these swing states and these independent voters. What I'm keenly aware of, though, is as long as he's losing on those key metrics, he's going to have a very hard time quieting people's concerns. And I do think he is doing his darndest to shut down this discussion as soon as possible. And I think he's trying to get out in front of it by making these appearances. The concern is if he makes any more gaffes, he's just going to make it even worse. So I don't know, y'all. I genuinely don't know how this is going to play out. I don't see him leaving. I'll put it this way. I don't see him leaving, at least right now. I don't see him dropping out of the race. I think he's been really clear that he's not going to. On the same time, by the same token, I don't see this rhetoric about his issues going away anytime soon either, unfortunately.
And so Finland joined NATO, 800-mile border is a significant, and they're already allies. but they weren't part of NATO.
I agree, but we can't blame ourselves for this. I mean, look, I think most of us were not Biden people. I think most of us felt disappointed that there wasn't a real primary. I think most of us felt disappointed that none of the other candidates that we would have been more excited about even put their names in the hat. And it is late, but it's also better late than never, right? Like, and you got to remember, like, Biden's the guy. Biden is the guy, y'all. If Biden doesn't get out of the way and he stays on the ticket, that's all Biden. But handing the keys over to somebody else is also all Biden. And it's not that difficult to do if he decides to do it. He's the guy that can do it. He can literally hand over the infrastructure. He's got to get Kamala to sign off on it, but it's definitely something he can do. And that is another consideration, is that if he were to do it, he would have a lot more say in who's next and how that transition goes. I made a point the other day in Gather that I think is worth reflecting. When I talk about the politicians and the people in the Democratic Party being concerned about Biden, I realize that a lot of them are career politicians that you may not care about their political fortunes. But one thing you should understand is that the real success of keeping Project 2025 from becoming a reality requires an entirely full functioning democratic system. And some of those people that are worried about their own place and their own fortunes, all I want you to understand is that they're acting on information that's in their best interest. It's their livelihood on the line. So I'm just saying, like, if they're this concerned, it's probably because they're looking at really good information about the current situation, and they find that information genuinely concerning. You may not care about them, but that's usually a good indicator that there's a real problem.
And I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall what he said in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind it being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50 to support Ukraine. 50. We were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. We're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. Where's it?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do, what they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating them. They're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves, they're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that Xi believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we cannot, you have to make clear, China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so we, for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well. If you want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules. And you don't have the authority, and you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public.
All right, I want to address something that Beck had said before, which is Biden voters are never going to vote for Trump if Biden leaves. They will still vote blue. Unfortunately, the swing voters may screw us. Yeah, this is my concern. I think it's a lot of people's concern. The truth is, like, I don't see a whole ton of risk, or quite as much as others do, in replacing Biden, because I think the base goes to whoever's at the top of the ticket. And they are mostly going to vote blue no matter who. And I also think Biden can do it in such a way that it seems like it's his idea. He puts all the funding and the machinery behind the person, and really kind of motivates the base. It is those swing and independent voters that are hanging in the balance. And I think a lot of them are just having a power trip. You know, I think it's totally bad faith to be like, oh, well, yeah, you know, I'm not quite a Trump supporter, but I don't know if I can vote for Biden because he stutters too much, or he messes up when he speaks, or whatever, like, or he tripped up going up the stairs to Air Force One. Like, it's so terrible, but you know, that's where they're at. And I think they like the idea of being courted, and like seeing how much they can upset the apple cart between now and November. And unfortunately, it looks like they can upset it quite a bit. Nitty's here.
And I think you'll see that some of our European friends
Nitty
are going to be curtailing their investment.
We're on
in
YouTube.
Russia. I mean, excuse me,
Okay.
in China. As long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy, as well as help them in, as a consequence, that their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and there was, I didn't hear any, I can't swear that everyone agreed, because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons, and the ability to, it came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of
now, is this a real move towards globalization on Biden's part, or is this another fever dream? Because I mean, this has been one of the critiques of NATO for the longest time, right? Is that it's got no teeth without its own actual military capacity. So what were you going to say, Nitty?
I mean, appealing to munitions and the potential for national defense, hey, that could sway some swing voters that like America first.
Yeah, I mean, I literally can't think of what issue might be to motivate a swing voter. And honestly, having to think about it makes me want to choke them and punch them all in the face. Because like if you're on the fence about which way to go, I just think you're a terrible person. Like, I'm sorry, I do. Like, I think all these people that are playing this game of like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, Trump is kind of a pervert, but I don't know. I really love to see him finish that wall. Like, I don't know. They're just bad people. They're just really bad people.
We're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues.
Y'all out there, hit up your swing voter friends and tell us what their issues are. Because if I identify any swing voter friends, we might not be friends anymore.
My European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, it's what Russia's trying to figure out. That they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to, the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was a discussion as well.
I'm sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look, like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. And but there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand the generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem. First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think that Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is.
All of these guys are warmongers. I don't, you know, it's certain issues we don't even have a distinction on. I do think Biden has a fundamentally better approach on these things than Trump does, even on things like Ukraine and Israel. I think these are problematic areas for Biden, but he's still way better than Trump. Yeah. Even on fucking Gaza, like, yeah, he's a Zionist. He says that all the time in his own words, but he will at least support a fucking ceasefire, whereas Trump will support what Gaza?
And anyway, but
He'll
so
ask if-
I think that I'm
He'll
prepared
ask
to
if
talk.
Gaza goes on his cheeseburger somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Is that a new sauce? Okay, I don't want any of that.
I don't want any of that.
Any
what the
leader who
woke
wants to
people eat.
talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anybody else has. We just put together with today, I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on the group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia, I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific.
I just want to say that, like, y'all, that's Biden. That's what, like, we're so mad about. Like, yeah, mixing up Putin and Zelensky is like, oof. Right? And sometimes Biden's gaffes are just like, whatever. And sometimes they're like, oof. But let's not confuse tripping up on the names Putin and Zelensky with not knowing which one to actually support and send money to. Right? Because that's the difference. People are like, he said Zelensky when he meant Putin, and he said Putin when he sent Zelensky. I'm like, he's trying to defend the Ukraine, and the other dude wants to wipe Ukraine off the map. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? Like, you know what I'm saying? And this is the same thing here. He's like, we added some Southeast, some nations from the South Pacific. He's like, yeah, we got Australia, we got New Zealand, we got Japan, we got Australia. Oh wait, I already said Australia. Yo, that's the Joe Biden problem. He's gonna forget that he already mentioned Australia. And again, I'm not a Joe Biden supporter, y'all. And quite frankly, I'm telling y'all, I'm entertaining the conversation about replacing him, and it's not even like my desire to replace him as much as it's just me accepting the reality that this is the conversation because people are concerned based on what the numbers look like. And if that's the case, I'd be happy to see him step aside. But can we just grapple with that? That is what we're talking about. That is the difference between these two. And that is what I'm saying. Like, when I tell y'all, like, I'm hearing the people who are concerned about Biden, I'm trying not to disrespect those people. But I want the people who we're doing all this for, who are in the middle, who are the fence sitters, to let you know I don't respect you at all. Because you're the reason we're having this dumbass conversation where we're comparing, like, maybe grab him by the pussy guy should be the next president versus Biden said Australia twice. You understand what I'm saying? Like, this shit is crazy, y'all.
Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target. And I don't take it lightly.
Sorry, fix that. I had gathered coming out the wrong thing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. I've saw some of the reporters around here cover me all the time have heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to.
Where y'all at with this two-state solution stuff? I kind of feel like so many things, and this does speak to what Lena be talking about. There's so many things where it's like we really do have two factions of one party that's really driven by corporate interest. But let me put it to something a little bit more mundane. Like, one of the things I've noticed doing like DEI work at the university level is that we're always a generation behind. So I went through a lot of DEI programming when I was going through, undergrad and grad school and different research programs and stuff like that. And it was cool. Like, it was all about increasing representation and getting you research experience, stuff like that. But now it's somewhere else where like we've done so much learning about equity and justice and cultural change and stuff like that. And now we're really trying to do DEI through like culture change. But since everything is still run by like, let's face it, older, more senior people, they're just now getting enthused, right, about doing DEI work. And so they're now really enthusiastic about investing in the type of models that I went through when I was training like 20 years ago, right? And those are no longer the best models to use, but they're just now getting on board with basically the last generation solution. Y'all see what I'm saying? And I feel like this happens with our politics a lot. Like they finally get on board with something that we thought was progressive like 20 years ago. And now when they're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And you're like, do we even want that anymore? I don't even know. Do we even do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yay, finally a two-state solution. But like, I think we're past two-state solution. I think most of us feel like a two-state solution is not really gonna work, and they need like one democratic solution where everybody gets to live together. And like, we don't really know how y'all gonna work this whole two-state thing. And these two particular states seem determined to not coexist next to each other, which is how we got in this mess to begin with. So I don't know where y'all are at, but that's just kind of where I'm feeling like we're kind of like late to the party with this two-state solution stuff.
Particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in.
Is Israel really has no right to exist as a political entity, but realistically they're not going anywhere. And so you think we have to go to two-state because Israel just will not entertain any sort of democratic single-state solution? Very interesting. The first proposal to separate Jewish and Arab states in the territory was made by the British Peel Commission report in 1937. Yeah, and like it's 2024. Do we really want to commemorate 100 years and still not having figured this out? Like, it's just... Y'all, I don't understand. I'm like, it's something wrong with me, but I love the idea of like a modern Homo sapien. You understand what I'm saying, y'all? And to me, like modern Homo sapiens, I know a lot of y'all out there with me. Y'all looking at the globe like, what's up, Earth? Come on, Earth. Earth, why are we still dropping bombs on other parts of Earth? Earth. Come on, Earth. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, Earth. Right? Like, it just ain't adding up, Earth. Like, when are we gonna be modern Homo sapiens? You understand what I'm saying, y'all? Who like don't drop bombs on other Homo sapiens, don't like exclude other Homo sapiens from bathrooms or sports. Just like normal fucking people who are in line with their smartwatches, and it's Jetsons time. Y'all want to live out our Jetsons fantasies with like inclusivity and everybody being happy and the world progressing towards a unified global socialism. It's 2024, goddammit. This is just too late for all this stuff. I got time for all this war nonsense. What are we talking about?
In a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I put forward have not succeeded.
That's true, PC.
Like the port reattached.
We've been doing. We really should be
successful.
trying. We really should be trying to make this up to the Palestinians because we did the Palestinians dirty from the beginning.
But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas,
There you go.
The one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the war cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on because it was not no one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north. I said, don't make the same mistake we made. Don't think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire, and get those. And by the way, look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again,
oh my
there are a lot of other
goodness.
people here too. But anyway.
That was, see, I told you sometimes Biden gaffes are oof. All right, we got one oof in there. We got a oof. Yeah, Biden, your numbers are better than in Israel than they are here. You may literally have not wanted to mention that. You may have wanted to leave that one off your data sheet, buddy. But that's okay. That's okay. Again, like nothing compared to Trump.
Bridge candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth. Most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom on how to deal with the Congress, to get things done.
That's
We
true.
got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats in the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform your
Am I using that way, you say?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out. For the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway. And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events from Wisconsin to North Carolina, to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And then look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters. I forget exactly how many. I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off. But we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized. We're moving. And that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done.
Are you live streaming, Jay?
I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around. More children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press said, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. Democracy is not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege based on this court? Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025? Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education, make sure, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job. because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff, I said, I'm going to go to South Korea. We're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out. Hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So I am not opposed if my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley.
Not well played. Definitely seems like he's hiding this one. This is, should just take the test. Be a lot easier.
Scripts.
Politics, Joe.
No,
President.
Jay, that's a
You said you're
no.
making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting
He's being asked about
restrictions for
cognitive tests. My
US-made
job is a
weapons
cognitive test.
inside
Is not
Russia?
an answer.
And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I got overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time.
I didn't hear what she said.
Show up at the convention. Overwhelming. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is, I understand the self-interest of every candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September.
It's like he literally said, "Go look at the polls," like that was going to reassure his cases. Then realizes it and says, "Oh wait, who believes in the polls anyway? You guys think these polls are accurate? These polls are fucked up. Don't believe these polls."
So, a lot can happen, but I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern, and I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that. Okay. Thank you.
This ends tonight's press conference. Thanks, everybody.
Please don't try to mic drop on that part, Joe Biden.
This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Very, very Joe Biden press conference. Man, it's damn interesting. So, look, y'all. I think, I think we're all. I think everybody here, is doing a solid in the sense of, listening to the whole thing, right? Because this is the middle of what we're in, and I wanted us to just sit together and listen to it and go through all of it, and I'm glad we did that. That way, you can make your own opinion about what was said, as opposed to just hearing sound bites from the news. So, yeah. Overall, let me speak to overall and speak to the moment. Overall, I think he's sort of back in line with what the expectations were of him probably going into the election, into the campaign. I certainly don't think that it was nearly the disaster for him that the debate was. With that being said, the real issue was he going to do enough to put this whole replacing Biden narrative to bed. And to be fair, that was a much higher bar. And I'm not sure what he could have done to clear it. I do think, like I said, overall, like there's just no comparing in the 100% failure rate of Donald Trump to ever sound like a reasonable elected official versus Joe Biden at his worst. Has never failed to sound like a reasonable elected official. And, you know, that was true again tonight. But again, we live in this bizarro upside down world where I do think people are gonna nitpick at the goofs and gaffes. And, you know, that's where we're at, is people will, you know, it'll be the concern over his issues with words, which again I think are certainly different now than what they seem to be at other times in his life with this stuttering or whatever. So there's that. And you know, mentioning Australia twice or saying Vice President Trump or whatever like that. And there are clearly some things I think he's failing to engage with. You know, I do think, you know, Trump's running around with his person, woman, man, camera, TV, or whatever. And, you know, Joe Biden looks like he's clearly running from the ask to take a cognitive assessment. His whole, my job is a cognitive test, it just isn't gonna do it. Like like we could agree with him all, like it's just not gonna do it. It's just not gonna cut it in the current line. That's not what people are talking about. And matter of fact, they realize that, and that's why it doesn't. In this case, it's circular. It's like, yeah, dude, like yes, people do realize that, and that's where the concern comes from. He keeps saying, watch me, and then do all these performance things. And so in that sense, he is inviting the performative. And that's again just something people are gonna have reasonable disagreements about. I know one of the conversations we were having was like, sort of, if you're in the riding with Biden camp, then there's some thought of just keep him out of this stuff. Just accept whatever damage has been done in terms of these public appearances. Stop making them. Get him back to electioneering, get him back to working, have a damn documentary, follow him around and show how his every waking moment, he gets the most out of him, and he's just presidenting all goddamn day, doing really meaningful, grateful things. They seem to be taking a different tact, which is to get out in front of everything and show the world that he can do the interviews and he can do the television appearances and he can do all the things with the big spotlight on them. And like I said, I think then you are inviting critique of the performative nature of all of this, and people are still going to hit him on that. But most things I think he handled pretty tactfully. Like I think most of the stuff is pretty basic. Like again, like I just don't think there's anything. There's nothing so substantial in the goofs and gaffes themselves that they're super alarming. But the reality is I just don't control the narrative around that, and so we'll see. Yeah, so what do you guys think? Y'all know how I feel. I'm with him if he's on the ticket. I do, it's tough for me, right? Because I'm not a huge Biden guy. I'm trying to muster as much enthusiasm about him as I can. And that's kind of what I meant earlier, which is that even though I don't think his policies are like big, bold, and sexy, there's just something comforting about how just mature he is, and like I said, he's just always sort of doing the normal, everyday, reasonable politician thing. Of course, there are some of those issues, man, when you start talking about Russia and Ukraine, when he started talking about the Middle East, when they asked him about him being what we call in wrestling a transitional champion, which is you've got a star and you've got another star, and you don't want to get either of them to be. So you put somebody in the middle. Joe Biden, that's what he promised us. He was going to be a one-term president. And when he was asked about that, he went on some long diatribe about the Middle East. And they, had to repeat the question, which was one of the big critiques from the debate. So, that sort of, you are going to see people saying that reminded them of that and all that type of stuff. So I think he's still in this thing. I really don't. I like to say I didn't see him do anything that hurt him tonight. I was actually listening to what he had to say, and he actually had some good stuff to say. Some of the things he talked about in terms of giving NATO some real teeth, continuing to reinforce the idea that it's important that we tax the rich, talking about being pro-union, talking about being working class, really drawing the contrast between him and Trump, I think in a reasonable way, I would say at almost every opportunity he got. Like it was Joe Biden. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was Joe Biden in the sense of, if I remove the debate and the fallout from the debate sort of from this election cycle, it's a thoroughly uneventful Joe Biden event, right? Which, to be fair, has always been a couple of goofs and gaffes and oofs and, awkward self-righteousness here and there, right? It's Joe Biden, y'all. It's Joe Biden. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna stop being Joe Biden. So again, there was nothing in there that like, yeah. So I don't see it being a disaster. I think for people that are like looking for him to like totally bomb every public appearance that he makes or something like that, I just don't think that narrative is going to emerge. But I do think there was unfortunately just enough that people will take and run with. Like I said, to be fair, I don't think, or to be honest, rather, I don't think it is fair. But to be honest, I don't even know that was a hurdle he could have cleared. I think people are going to nitpick him no matter what he did, but I think he did pretty reasonably. So I am interested to see what the dialogue and what the response is. And there was other moments I wasn't crazy about, like him inviting people to check out the polls and then undermining the polls. That's going to play really poorly, because people are going to accuse him of being in denial about the polls, but then actually he must be kind of aware about what's going on in the polls, because you can see him sort of realize what he had said. but then instead of just engaging honestly then with the problematic polling, sort of just undermining the nature of polling, which a lot of people do. A lot of people say things that, you know, undermine the legitimacy of polls, especially when it's poll results that they don't like. But it's never a good look for an elected official to do that. It's just the nature of the business that polling has a very significant place in sort of the data available to people to assess what's going on. And no matter how you feel about the results of the polling, you know, you just address what you think is going on. But yeah, I don't think he's going to win many people over by undermining the polling. But yeah, like again, but again, y'all, like this is just the bizarro world we live in, because again, like I don't like. Does it matter in the end of the day? Like, I'm trying to be fair, y'all. Okay, so let's put it out there. So shit like mentioning Australia twice, Vice President Trump, all this type of stuff. You gotta at least think people are trying to argue that it's indicative of some sort of serious cognitive issues, because those type of mistakes on their own, they just seem so superficial. And I don't want to pretend that I'm in a position to like assess the somebody's cognitive faculties from watching them give a press conference, but that's the case that somebody will be trying to make to you if that's what they're going to go off, right? Because like I said, you know, saying Zelensky when you met Putin in a press conference means very little to me when, again, the alternative actually told Putin to do what he wants and will send him support to do so. Like, it's just crazy that that's the comparison. But that is the moment we live in, and I think actually Beck spoke to that earlier really well, which is like it's really not about those of us who are on the vote blue, no matter who, for whatever reason, side. Like, we have to be honest. Number one, where a lot of us are fucking marginalized people who have to vote blue no matter who, as a matter of actual survival. And then a lot of us are just reasonable adult human beings who recognize that it's probably a bad idea to elect a fascist dog catcher, because why would you put fascists in power in any way, shape, or form? And so are likewise on team vote blue no matter who. And we're also like pretty high up there in terms of being like politically informed. Most of us pay attention to the news and probably read up on different sources, probably actually follow different sources, right? Like, you probably get your news and your commentary from various sides and stuff like that. Even the fact that we're the type that'll sit here on a 2-hour stream and actually listen to Joe Biden's entire press conference, right? Rather than have clips digested to a secondhand, and then go beyond that and be engaging in communities, having our own discussions and debates about them. I mean, that just puts you in a, let's just say you're just not like the average citizen. And I don't mean that to blow smoke up your ass. I'm just being realistic with you. So it comes down to these swing state people. And kind of like I said to Nitty earlier, I don't understand them human beings. Like, if you're on the fence between them two people, I just don't get you. I just don't get you. I just don't understand. And if you're somebody even who watched that debate, which was apparently a nightmare for Joe Biden, which I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I didn't think the debate was like a tremendous performance from Joe Biden, but people understand what I'm reacting to is the reaction and the fallout. I didn't think his debate was that catastrophic. I really didn't, because maybe I just wasn't expecting much from Joe Biden. And maybe I just don't put as much into the debate because I feel like I'm overexposed to these candidates. Maybe that was it. Maybe like it just wasn't maybe I just have a larger sample size on Joe Biden, and so I just kind of know this is where we're at with Joe Biden. But nevertheless, so I don't understand, right? But apparently that's what we're being told, right? That's what we're being told. We're being told this is all so catastrophic that it's actually really hurting him in the swing states. It's even hurting him in some of the blue, core states. Other people seem to be able to beat Donald Trump, and people are literally not confident that Joe Biden has a path to victory. That does seem to be where people are genuinely at. And I know it's really easy to take shots at those people, but I literally don't think it's fair to say that those people are like trying to elect Donald Trump or some shit like that. They're just not. So this is where we're at, and we'll see what happens. All right, so let's get some stuff. So Punk said, "Look, if Biden's on the ticket, then Biden gets my vote. But I'm not about to plug my ears and close my eyes and pretend there's nothing wrong with the guy." Punk, that's where I think a lot of people are at, and where I'm at with all of that is I've always, in a sense, felt like that narrative was unfair to Biden, but it has been the narrative for a long time. And now I think it is playing itself out in a really public, way. And unfortunately, like, the right sucks, but they're good at shit like this. They identified the vulnerability with Biden. They crammed that fucking narrative down people's throat from day one. And you know what? That was one of those ones where it was just a matter of time. And, could Biden get 2 terms out, before that became the, because that's just going to happen to everybody. It's literally going to happen to everybody. It's unavoidable. And again, like, it honestly doesn't matter, because I'll tell you what, even if I thought Biden couldn't make it to his inauguration, I do think Kamala Harris is capable and would be historic. And in a lot of ways, from a policy perspective, the things that I'm interested in, a lot of issues, she would be stronger than Biden. I know she's not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm certainly not gonna lose sleep because Kamala Harris is in office instead of Joe Biden, right? So it's not really that critical to most of us, because I'm not wishing anything harmful upon Joe Biden. But even if the worst of the worst happened to the man and he just was no longer with us, which would be a tragedy, because he's a good person, and I think even the people that want him out of the situation, they want him to step aside, right? Nobody's like rooting against him like on some like morbidity type stuff. But even if something like that happened, I think Kamala Harris would be fine. So I'm not panicked about Joe Biden in that regard, because if Joe Biden ever becomes for real incapable of executing the responsibilities of the office, we do have a capable vice president who I think would be able to do that just fine, and maybe a perfect time to usher in her thing. And what if Kamala got 3 terms out of that, right? Because wouldn't she still get to get elected twice? Like, if she transitioned into the first Biden one, would she still get to get elected twice after that? Didn't FDR or somebody get like 3 terms or some shit like that? Like, wouldn't that be a crazy turn of events? I don't know how that would work out these days, but yeah, like I'm not gonna panic about Joe Biden's health, and from a policy perspective, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. But the question is, are you calling the bluff of the so-called swing state independents and the moderates and all of these people? And again, I cannot imagine what the issues are that would pull them in one direction versus the other. Because if you're telling me you know of even a fraction of the real shit about Donald Trump, but you tell me you don't want Joe Biden to be president because he's too old or something like that, like I literally think you're a bad person. I'm just being honest. If a person tells me that, I just think they're a piece of shit already. I really do, because it's such a bad faith argument. But apparently that's where we're at. So what do you do with those people? What do you do with those people? Steph said Urban is meeting Trump tomorrow. He met Putin 2 days ago. Vote for Trump. You get those guys. What? Want that? No. None of us want that. None of us want that. But look, let me just say this. I think it behooves everybody who is on the vote blue side to talk to each other in good faith, because I'm a person who will tell you when I think somebody's acting in bad faith. I hope y'all realize that about me, and I don't feel that way right now. I genuinely do not. I think the people who insist that it's too late, it's whatever, Biden's our best chance, we need to stick with Biden and we shouldn't weaken him, I think they are trying to do what they think is in the best interest of the party, best interest of the ticket, best interest of winning, and ultimately the best interest of making sure Donald Trump is not the next president of the United States of America. But I think the people who have sincere concerns about Biden, particularly his electability, and are a bit panicked and think that it's appropriate to make a change at the top of the ticket, I think they're also acting in good faith. I genuinely do. And it's interesting to me because I don't consider myself a centrist about any fucking thing. But I do find it interesting that both sides are just accusing each other of enabling Donald Trump. Both sides are accusing each other of being conspiracy theorists and really wanting MAGA to win. And I'm like, really? Like, infighting is one thing, but calling each other MAGA, like really insisting that the people who don't agree with you want the other guy to win, like that's not what's happening. Some people really think we need to stick with him. He's our best shot. Other people disagree. They don't agree with you. You should be okay with that. They just don't agree with you. They literally just think if we switched him and that he could help us switch, they think if we could coax him into being the guy who acts like making this switch was his idea, we get all his base and then some. They think that's a way of adding. They think that's a way of getting us more numbers. They think that's a way of getting us swing states, getting us independents, getting us moderates. Like, that's what they're trying to do. Maybe it is last minute. Maybe it would be a little bit messy, but we do technically have time. We have not even got to the convention. We literally have not put a single name on a single ballot for November. Those votes literally can change. Even the ones Joe Biden's running around about being democratically pledged to him, those people could literally decide that that's not in the best interest of the people that they're elected to cast those votes on behalf of. Trust and believe they could do something different with those votes. And again, if Joe Biden changes his mind, he can tell them to do something different with those votes. So people are exercising their democratic, flex. Like they're trying to make a move. And like, again, yes, we consider it all day. I agree with you. It's too late. Should have did it 4 years ago. Shouldn't have believed Biden in the first place when he said he was going to be a one-term president, because who could have predicted that motherfucker was lying when he said it? All of us. So like there's a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda, but this is where we find ourselves at. People panic when they panic. And when they panic, they start looking for alternatives. And so, the same way some people think it would behoove us to all shut the fuck up and support Biden and stop poking holes in this man. I personally think it would behoove us to turn the temperature down a little bit, let the process play out. Maybe you don't agree with the people on the other side, but let them make their case. Let them produce the data that they think supports their argument. Let's have the discourse about, whether it's better to go with precedent or whether these times call for us to do something different, what the alternatives look like, and how we might get to those alternatives. Here's what I think is the real danger. One of the real dangers is we need to make a move and we do this damn running the damn clock out thing, and we really do find ourselves in a situation where it's too late to make a change. I don't think we're there yet, but that time will come. And then the other thing is, I think after the convention, after the names are on the ballots and stuff like that, there does get to be a time where this gets to be too ugly. But I think as long as people get on the same page at the convention and we have a candidate coming out of the convention, that's when I'll get a little bit more concerned about the infighting. I do understand why people think it hurts now, though. So I'm sensitive to that. And I guess for me, it's so in the margins because it's not new to these people. I think if they're not already committed Biden supporters, then it's not like you're convincing people who were gonna vote for Biden to not vote for him. I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah. Yeah, but Steph, there's a first time for everything, right? Like I get that this hasn't worked out historically trying to replace an incumbent, but there isn't a lot of cases for us to look at with the situation really like this for precedent. And again, you're dealing with Trump. He's just an unprecedented figure, and he can sink the ship. He can sink the ship. And so I don't. Okay, I guess you don't agree. I mean, that's fine, but again, I just think people are. I don't know why it can't just be a disagreement. I don't know why people have to be acting in bad faith or that means they want Trump. And I'm saying that because I'm trying to stop them from hurling the same accusation as at you, right? Like the people who were making commentary on the left are calling the riding with Biden people blue anon, and they're saying that they're blue MAGA because they want to go down with the ship and they want to go with their king no matter what, and they want to ignore all the signs in front of them, and they want to ignore the polls, and they want to ignore the data, and they say it's all about saving democracy and we've got to do what we have to do to save democracy. Yet if the polls show that their guy is going to be the reason we can't save democracy, they're like, nah, like let's stick with him anyway. And so people can say the same thing, and again, I just don't think it's helpful. Like, I've been yet to be convinced why it can't just be people disagreeing. They just don't agree about what the best course of action forward is. I don't see why that means either is full of shit or wants Trump to win or any of that. They just don't agree. Yeah, a Dem who would replace Biden needs to both declare and secure Biden's endorsement. And both of those things can happen overnight. They can happen overnight. All that has to happen is one single person has to be convinced that that is what is indeed best for the party and the country. And there are people who think it's their job to try to convince that one person. And so they are going about trying to convince that one person. And honestly, I think this narrative about people should be focused on Trump, y'all, the news cycle, the media cycle is focused on Trump 24/7, 365, and has been since 2016. Trump is the most talked about, covered, televised, reported on, even in Joe Biden's press conference. The last question was about Donald Trump's social media post, because in real time, Joe Biden can't have a press conference without Donald Trump becoming the right. And half the conversation is about Donald Trump. So people are talking about Trump. They are well aware of the issue with Trump, but Trump fear mongering, and I'm not saying that disrespectfully. I mean like the legitimate act of making people aware of the very legitimately scary circumstances that we are facing with the prospect of another Trump presidency is not going to stop people from voting for Donald Trump. And apparently it's also not going to stop people from saying, well, Trump may be terrible, but Biden's too old. And so people feel like that's the lay of the land. And unfortunately, that's what they've got to deal with. And they see removing Biden as the path to get them a winning ticket, but they're still trying to win the game. This is like getting in a huddle with your teammates and suggesting that because they want to run a different play, they actually want to lose the game. Maybe you don't think their play call is as good as your play call, but I think I just think it's wrong to suggest that they're calling that play because they want to lose the game. They're calling that play because they think this strategy is not working and we need to do something different. Other people think this is our strategy. You know, this is the play that won us the last championship, and we're gonna try it and we're gonna stick with it until somebody beats us. All right, y'all. If y'all want to continue the conversation, y'all know where to find us. We'll be in Gather. Thank y'all so much for tuning in and for watching the press conference along with me. If you watch later, please leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think about all this. You can hit me up on socials as well. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And